Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. This is the Swordier Type 18C, and before I get into the video, a couple quick disclaimers. First, it's a review sample. It was sent to me for free, and if you think that makes me biased, you know at the start. The second thing I need to note is that I don't study historic European martial arts, so if you see me moving this around and I look a bit doltish, then that's because I am. The other bit that you need to know is this is $289, at least as of the recording of this video. I don't think that figure includes shipping, but it could go up, it could go down. Sometimes Swordier runs sales, and also there is inflation and tariffs and other things that could make it cost more money. So anyway, at least as of the recording, it's advertised at $289. I'll link in the description down below if you're interested in picking one up. The first thing I'm going to go over in the video here is bits and bobs and fits and features. I'll talk about the build quality, tell you what I think about it, and hopefully that is helpful in helping you decide if it is worth your money or not, which is the main goal here. I will also cut with the sword, move it around a little bit, and give you my thoughts on it. I will then also do a little bit of a comparison with this sword right here. This is the Albion Mercenary, and there has been some speculation that this takes a lot of inspiration from the Albion Mercenary, and I will give my thoughts on that as well towards the end. And I also have a little bit of a special guest, a second opinion, if you will, on the subject from another person who has got this sword as well as an Albion Mercenary, so hopefully those two perspectives are useful to you. Anyway, bits and bobs and fits and features. First, I'm going to start with the pommel, the end cap, this bit right here. And shape-wise, just in general, I really like the shape. This is a faceted scent stopper pommel. It's one of my favorites. It is pretty enough to show the facets in detail, and it's also kind of chamfered enough or dull enough where it doesn't bite in your hands. Sometimes these can be really, really sharp, and when you grab onto them, if you are one who likes to grab a pommel, then it can chew up your hands if you're not using it with a glove. This one is faceted in a way that I can make out all the individual facets. It catches the light, it has depth and dimension, but it doesn't bite into my hand, so I like that much. The peen at the end here does have a few kind of misplaced hammer marks. It could be cleaner. For the price point though, I'm really not going to shake a stick at it. Obviously, if you spend more money, you kind of expect more. At $300, we're in the budget realm of blades, and I can't really expect a lot of refinement here. As it is, it's pretty enough. It could be done more, but honestly, it's done to a level where I could probably take a file or some sandpaper and clean it up if I was really particular about it. The facets as well do have a little bit of asymmetry to them. They're not bad, but there's some that kind of wander a little here or there. It's not really anything that I would complain about, again, for this price point, but they're not perfectly symmetrical. So if that's something that's going to bother you, then I guess know that. Again, I don't know of one that is perfectly symmetrical or better for $300. So I do think that it's in the realm of perfectly acceptable. The other bit is if we run down here to the grip, where does it meet? Sometimes in these swords or budget swords or even medium tier swords, the pommel tends to overlap this kind of, I guess where they meet tends to look ugly. Either it's bunchy, it's poorly transitioned, it doesn't look finished, or the metal just simply overlaps and can create a little bit of a hot spot, at least if you're like me and you tend to use these in bare hands. This one looks relatively well finished. It overlaps reasonably well, and I don't see any unfinished bits or anything that looks like it wasn't given attention. Then move up to the grip itself. I'm not sure if this is a wooden core grip or a 3D printed one. I'm not sure. I've started to see more plastic grips that appear to be 3D printed used. This feels like it might be a plastic grip underneath, though I'm not 100% sure. As it is, though, it's small and elliptical. I can index, I can feel right where the edge is. I feel relatively connected to the sword. I like the center riser on the sword as well. It is placed in such a way where I can feel it in my one hand. It rests between kind of my pinky and ring finger, and it gives me some additional grip. Likewise, it is more circular down at the base here. So if I'm using it in another hand and I'm kind of twisting and turning and I need to adjust my grip, it's not hard to do that. In one hand or two, the grip accommodates. With two hands, though, I do find myself definitely using the pommel. I tend to choke down even more and just grab the pommel. I don't find any discomfort in doing that. The leather does feel not fully secured, though. So if I push on it, it feels like I have a little bit of motion. And on the reverse side of the grip, I have this cord that's been bound and it's stitched. It matches on the reverse side of the scabbard as well. Now, aesthetically, I like the contrast. If you're going to put stitching on here, I like that it's a different color and it leans into the fact that it's stitched. It's relatively even. The downside is the stitching moves. So if I pull on it, I can kind of get those threads to bubble up or move around. That gives me the impression that this leather, or at least the stitching here, is not going to last really long. I haven't cut or moved this sword around a lot, As it is, the stitching will move. With a lot of use, I have a feeling that's going to be something that's going to need to be redone. The leather as well, if I were to kind of pull at it, I don't know how glued on it is or how secure it is. As it is, it feels supple and comfortable on the hand. It doesn't feel like it's going to move or twist or something like that, but I'm not sure how problematic this would be. It's kind of a candidate for something I see a red flag, if you will, as something I have some concerns about the durability on. What would I recommend to fix it? Well, I don't know that you need to necessarily change fixing it, but gluing the leather here down in a way that feels like it's not moving, or that pressure under my fingers isn't gonna move the surface of the leather, and then stitching these tighter or gluing them down. I'm not sure which exactly is going to resolve it, but either I think is going to be progress in keeping it stable and not likely to come undone. I'm not sure if I could glue this down and preserve the handle though. If I were to lacquer it, it would be kind of rough on my hands and I would lose some feeling, but that might be a solution if you already have one and start to experience this problem. As I move down from the grip, I want to point out the little rain flappy bit here. Now this has some glue in the corners that keep it in this kind of wedge shape, in the taco shape that covers the scabbard. So it's got something in there to kind of hold its shape. I really like it, and it also, when I choke up on the grip, my hand meets this comfortable, supple leather feeling thing, and it's a lot more nice to my digits than other swords have been. I generally don't like rain flaps. I kind of find them, I don't know, just aesthetically not to be my thing. Functionally though, this is the first time I've kind of really played with one, and I have to say that from a functional standpoint, I do actually like how it feels in my hands. It also keeps this part of the blade, which always is meeting my hands, from getting oil and then getting rusty, and so that much as well I think is appreciated. It also seems to make a relatively handsome looking assembly here. I can't say that I mind the overall look. The rain flap as well, I don't know, it's grown on me, I guess I'll say that. Moving to the crossguard, we have some upswept quillins that are kind of spatulated out a little bit. It has some dimension and shape to it. I can't say that I mind the look. It's classic, and as I think of a medieval sword, this is generally the crossguard that I tend to think of. Moving down from the crossguard, or actually before I move down from the crossguard, I can say that the gap in the crossguard is bigger than I would like to see, but not grotesque. It also looks relatively clean, so it doesn't look like it's been milled out and kind of fiddled with a lot to fit the sword, so that much as well is quite nice. The crossguard seems to be relatively sturdy. And yes, it also has this kind of center ridge, which you might not see because it's covered by the rain flap. And this center ridge is a little beefier than I would like. If I wanted to get a finger above it, I almost feel like it's blocking me a little bit. And I'd like it to be like a 1/8 of an inch recessed. It's just a little too bulbous for me. But I digress. I'm going to move on to the scabbard here. I like the scabbard, frankly. It's a little thicker wood than what I've seen from a lot of Chinese manufacturers. It's covered in this tanned leather, which feels soft. It feels like a higher quality leather than what is on the grip, but I could be wrong. And as I push my fingers on it, the leather doesn't move around, which is what happens with most, well, a lot of the leather scabbards that I've felt from China. It has the same stitching along the back. It's relatively even and nice. It has these little buckles here for you to attach some sort of something to attach to a belt system. A chape down at the end, and I like that the chape is kind of pinched down. Sometimes these little wedges stick out, and then if you're walking around with this on your belt, it has an opportunity to catch on things, snag. I'm clumsy that way and don't pay attention, so having these really close and not giving me the opportunity to knock things over with them is appreciated. I don't see any leather cover for the mouth of the scabbard here, though. I see the same little stitching. I see some recess that matches the guard, but I don't see anything that covers the mouth. Opportunity to either paint this, do something with it so that you can't see how the sausage is made so much. Moving from there, I'm going to talk about the blade, pointy stabby part, and what I see here is a big wide blade at the base that tapers down pretty dramatically in profile, and then does have some distal taper that's been incorporated. It has a strong central ridge. It doesn't ripple a lot. It's relatively clean, and then it came with a factory edge that I would say is generally better than what most European swords come with, but not quite as sharp as some of the katana that Swordier has sent out. It has the profile, though, that with just a little bit of honing, you could absolutely get the tip right where you want it. The edge. The tip as well came relatively pointy. It thins out quite a bit and doesn't have any reinforcement, which is going to be an important note as I compare it to the Albion later. The blade, though, doesn't wander. It doesn't have lots of, issues. It's not pocked with hammer marks or grind lines or tool marks. It's got a relatively simple, not quite mirror polish, and overall is relatively handsome. So I've marked the weapon dynamics in the description down below. I'll talk a little bit about moving this around and how it feels, but if you know more about European swords, then the weapon dynamics computer is probably going to do a better job. I've also provided measurements of 2 Albion mercenaries down there, so you can compare how they relate, which again will probably be more important as I compare it to that mercenary later. But feeling in the hand, it's delightful. I feel like I can get the point where I want to with one hand. In 2 hands, it comes alive, and I feel like I can deliver a lot more authority in the cut. As it is, I feel like I can get the edge where I want it to go. I feel like I can get the point where I want it to go. And it doesn't feel exhausting. It feels really comfortable in the hand. It's really quite delightful. It's my favorite longsword or European style sword that I've gotten to play with from Swordier. And I like the look of it. I like the look of the mercenary. That's one of my favorites from Albion. And so I'm predisposed to liking it, since this sword obviously takes some inspiration from it, or seems to anyway. Dynamically though, if you're looking for a sword that's kind of primarily leans towards one-handed use, I'd say that that's kind of where this one feels. It feels like it's more made for one-handed and then can be used with two-handed, as opposed to designed for two-handed but can be used one-handed. That's the vibe that I get with the sword, and it is really comfortable. It's delightful, and I didn't have a problem cutting with it. When I talk about usage, I didn't push this to failure as I have with some of the other swords, more or less because of time. I'm just running short on time. The opportunity that I have time-wise and weather-wise are somewhat limited, and going and breaking stuff, there's a little bit of setup involved, and I can't seem to find a day that isn't pocked with rain. But I have broken other Swordier swords. I pushed them to failure, and I generally speaking think that they make a reasonably durable sword. Historically, the hilt has been the point that causes a little bit of bending, but they've held up to doing things that frankly you wouldn't want to do with most swords. I whacked my stand a few times with this. I cut water bottles, jugs, things like that, pool noodles, and it was really fun to cut with. Frankly, that's the note to take away, is I could get the edge where I wanted to. I could thrust and poke with it. It's very fun looking, and it also is pretty handsome. If you wanted to use this for a Renfest or Garb or something like that, I think it has absolutely a very handsome appearance to it. So anyway, I don't know that my feedback on cutting is particularly useful. I didn't do a lot with it, but I can say it came with an edge sufficient enough to do the types of backyard cutting fun that I like to do. It also came with an edge that I think could be honed and really do a much better job cutting and make a much easier work of the targets I used. It also seems to have durability enough to hold up to something a little bit more robust if you wanted to do tatami with it. I wouldn't recommend cutting 2x4s or logs or trees down with it, but for the normal kinds of targets, it seems to be more than sufficient. There were also a few times that I missed the target pretty good and whacked it into the stand and had the opportunity to bend and deform, and I didn't see any of that, despite not deliberately trying to abuse it, but having a few cases where you would definitely call it abuse. So it seems to hold up. It moves well. It cuts reasonably well. For $289, I was actually reasonably impressed. Before giving my final thoughts, I want to do some comparisons between the Albion Mercenary and the Swordier Type 18C. Are they the same sword? No, but in my estimation, the Type 18C from Swordier draws a little too much from the Albion Mercenary. It's a little bit too close. So there are some differences. If I start with the pommel, the neck on the 18C from Swordier is a little longer. The facets are a little different. The Albion's finished a little better. It's a little more crisp in terms of the lines. The facets are a little bit more even and symmetrical. The grip is obviously a little different. The Albion is a better caliber of grip. It's a wood core wrapped in leather, then bound and secured in some sort of twine, and it creates this very rigid, doesn't move in your hand, and indexes very well style grip, and it's quite comfortable. The crossguard in the Mercenary doesn't have that prominent central ridge. It's a little wider, and the gap in the crossguard is almost non-existent. The blade on the Albion Mercenary has a little bit more linear taper in terms of profile, just right down to the edge. It doesn't kind of bow out a little bit like the Mercenary or the Type 18C does, and it also has a reinforced tip. So there are some differences, but I don't know that they're different enough. And if I take the 18C, I can absolutely put it in the scabbard of the Swordier, the Swordier Type 18C. So the profile and difference in shape is not super significant, because this actually fits the Mercenary quite well. Now, does that make them the same sword? No, it's not the same sword. There are some differences. It's not a one-for-one copy anyway, but I would say in the realm of intellectual property, is it pretty close? It's pretty close. And I would say that while they're not doppelgangers, they are maybe very close cousins. and that may be too close to for comfort for some folks. So what could be done to change it and make it less similar? I think that a different pommel would really go a long way. The crossguard and rain flap are a departure. The grip is a little bit of a departure, as is the material used. The scent stopper pommel in combination with this grip, I think, make the hilt, especially given that it's about the same size, feel more or less kind of too close for comfort. So a slightly different shape and maybe a longer handle or a shorter handle might change things a little bit. The blade as well, I think if there was a slight profile change, obviously if it just didn't fit, if the mercenary didn't fit in the scabbard for this and it wasn't the same, that would probably be a step in the right direction. So I think making the blade a little bit wider that would fit with the 18C, and probably a little bit longer to fit with the 18C description that the Swordier is going for. While they are similar, they're not the same, but in my estimation, too close for comfort. But that is just one man's opinion, and I do have a special guest. So By the Sword is joining me here to give his thoughts, and I am going to link his channel in the description down below. Go and check it out. He also has a Type 18C from Swordier and an Albion Mercenary, and can compare and contrast.
I want to thank Matthew Jensen for letting me give my thoughts on these two specific swords, the Albion Mercenary and the Swordier Type 18C blade that you see right here. I'm sure Matt has already spoken about all the different fittings on the swords and given his opinion. And he asked me to give a little bit of my thoughts on these particular blades. Since he already talked about the fittings, and I think if you look at the fittings, you'll see they're not much different. And I've already given my thoughts as well on a video that I've done on my channel as well concerning these two particular swords. But where I think they differ is in the most important part, the blades. When you look at these swords side by side, what you're going to start to see is the difference in the blade profiles themselves. The Albion Mercenary is supposed to be a Type 15A, whereas the Swordier is a Type 18C according to their own description. Now, I do have some thoughts about that, but I'll save that towards the end. The main differences between the 15A and the 18C is the shape of the blades themselves. 18Cs have a convex grind to them, where their parallel lines for the blades travel up the blade and then slightly start curving in towards a very acute point. Whereas Type 15s, being a primarily thrusting blade versus the 18Cs, which were a cut and thrust style blade, their points are almost straight line from the base of the blade all the way to the tip. It's almost completely straight. There's no convex grinding at all on the blades. It goes from base to very acute point. The other difference is right at the point. The Swordier 18C does not have a reinforced point. The Mercenary absolutely does. In fact, I've seen other people who have done reviews on this 18C sword have indeed broken off a portion of the tip while doing thrusting on it because it is not reinforced and is very, very thin. I've taken measurements of both of these swords. Base at roughly the center point, and normally at the tip, but I also did one a few inches back, like 3 inches back, in order to get a little bit more of a feeling for how distal taper looks, and to take into account that the Mercenary does indeed have a reinforced point. At least on my model anyway, the Swordier version has a wider base at 5.55 millimeters thick, whereas the Albion is a 5.3 millimeter. At roughly the halfway point, we have a 5.25 on the Mercenary and a 5 millimeter on the 18C Swordier version. So this one maintains its thickness a little bit more for a little bit more rigidity, given it being a thrusting style blade. Roughly about here, a few inches back from the point, I got a 3.6 millimeter on the Mercenary and a 3.3 millimeter on the Swordier model. And then the tip itself was almost a little over 3 millimeters on the reinforced tip, whereas the tip on the Swordier was only a 1.7 millimeter. Now, here's where things get weird. Not between these two blades, because I do believe they're different. Where things get weird is, once again, like I did in my previous video, how Swordier addresses what their sword is. They refer to this sword as an 18C. Is it an 18C? The reason why I responded in such a succinct manner is because of how Swordier does its classifications for swords. They're attempting to follow the Oakshot typology, but there's a little bit of lost in translation, I think. And part of that comes down to the blade shape does fit an 18C, and so does the general sword profile. The problem is it also sort of fits an 18A. Whenever you look at the Oakshot typology, however, the 18As tend to have a fuller, about a third of the way up the blade. Whether or not that was a defining feature, I don't know. But it definitely is from all of the drawings we see, and it's what we most often associate with an 18A when we look at things like the Brescia Spadona, right? That's what we visualize with an 18A, is having the fuller. This one doesn't. Did all 18As have a fuller? Once again, But the general sword profile works. The problem comes in with their interpretation once again, because all other versions of type 18Cs we have on the market, such as the Albion Principe, the Albion Alexandria, the Ronin Katana type 18C, and the Baylor Arms 18C, is that all of them start with a much wider base. All the Albions are roughly about a 3-inch base. The Ronin Katana was the widest, I believe, based on my measurements, at 3.2 inches, so it's a little wider. And the Baylor Arms was like 2.8 inches. So it all hovers roughly around that 3-inch mark. The Swordier version is hovering 2.3 inches, which is right on line with the Mercenary, which makes people think that they're roughly the same sword, even though their blade geometries are different. It really comes down to, is this really an 18C? I feel like it could be. It's just really, really thin.
I want to thank By the Sword channel for offering his commentary. Hopefully the perspectives here on if they're the same sword or not, or copies of one another, gives you some insight, and you can form your own opinion. Because if you are bothered by the intellectual property theft side of things, then this does seem, in my estimation, to be a little too close to the Albion Mercenary. I think it's targeting potentially the same buyer. I don't know that somebody that wants an Albion Mercenary and has the money to buy it is necessarily going to buy this one, but they might. I don't necessarily know. They do scratch similar itches in my collection, and so would I rather have a Mercenary? Yes, it's a higher quality product, but this is absolutely a delightful feeling sword, and very, very similar, and gets more things that the Albion Mercenary does correct also, than the $300 price tag might suggest. So that brings me to the point, do I personally think it's worth it or not? And if I separate out the intellectual property side of things for a moment, this is just a wonderful feeling sword. Dynamically, it feels very fun in the hand. It feels like a weapon. It feels like I can do things sword-like with it, even though I don't train with how to use this sword. It makes me feel almost like I do. It's relatively well made. It seems like a good product. There are some things that I would like to see improved or changed, but overall, for $289, this is absolutely fantastic. It feels good, it cuts well, and it's also a handsome package. And I think for $300 to be able to nail all those three things is really quite a surprise. What a time to be interested in swords and have so many inexpensive options that do so many things well. In the past, it seems like you would only be able to buy European swords that were clubbish or almost felt like a Geon with a European handle attached to them. Now, to get things that feel kind of the way they should, albeit maybe mislabeled, is really quite impressive. This is a fun sword, and I would absolutely say for $300, it is a treat to have, and I would highly recommend it, provided you are not bothered by some of the the scandalous nature of being similar to the Albion Mercenary. Anyway, that is what I have. I want to tip my hat to the folks at Swordier that sent this my way for review, also by the Sword Channel for joining me. I hope you found it interesting. Cheers, and thanks for watching.